bit nervous and stuff.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast, which is going to be called the Science of Comedy Podcast, or Comedy Science Podcast, or the Comedy Snob Podcast. It doesn't matter what the name is. People don't really care about the name. They just care about the person doing the podcast and the content, really. So it might be one of those names. It might not be. What is this podcast going to be about? Well, I think it's going to be about comedy nerds, for sure. I would say I'm definitely one of the biggest comedy nerds in the world. And I think I have a really strong claim to that because I'm actually also trying to be a stand-up comedian. And that's not to say that true comedy nerds can't, you can only be a big comedy fan if you've done stand-up. But I just think you miss out on some of the nuances of what it's like to craft a joke, a longer set, make it in this industry, a story, just to be in comedy. And I just think you don't get that appreciation unless you've really tried to do it properly yourself. And I think you just get this really deeper understanding of how it works. So yeah, that's why I think I'm a massive comedy fan. There's also the other side, which is quite disappointing, but a lot of our comedians I know actually don't love comedy all that much, which is a bit of a shame, because I guess why would you do it if you don't love it, the art form? And I guess, the lifestyle, it's a very attractive career. You get fame, fortune, and it's a very easy and sort of hedonistic sort of job. So I guess I can understand why. But I guess it's just a shame. Like I was gigging with this one comedian. This is great joke. She's one of the biggest comedians in the country right now. And I was like, oh, that joke is really like it's like a Mitch Hedberg sort of style. It's great. And she was like, well, who's Mitch Hedberg? And, I guess, and I don't expect everyone to know, but I guess if you've just been doing it for 10 plus years and you're selling out comedy clubs all over the country, I think it's just a shame to not know the greats because you can build on them. There's so much to learn. There's so much to appreciate, which again, I think is the whole point of this podcast, it's a safe space and a positive space for comedy nerds. There will be some negative stuff, but I think that will be reserved for my Patreon, which maybe I'll do later. But I just think there's too much negative content in terms of comedy on social media right now. There are a few channels that are doing some really great stuff, like what I'm doing, trying to appreciate comedy, a few video essay channels like the Nerd Writer, Nerdstalgic. There's a great channel called Comedy Without Errors, and there's a few other small ones here and there. But yeah, I just think there needs to be far more, because right now, if you look at the sorts of videos that are covering comedy, it's like Joe Rogan's newest special sucks, Hannah Gadsby isn't funny, Bert Kreischer is about to break down, blah, blah, blah. And it's firstly, I'm just surprised that there's a market for this kind of weird male podcast gossip, and secondly, it's just what's the, it's just why, what's the point of just hating on these comedians senselessly, I think they do, you might not necessarily agree with the way they put out content or, the way they present themselves, even their, comedy styles, but for the most part, they've succeeded in show business and they're selling out theaters or comedy clubs or even stadiums, and you're not. Neither am I. But that's why I want to really look at even if I don't think Joe Rogan is as at the same level as a Dave Chappelle or Bill Burr, like he's still doing so many things right, and and he's still got past at the Comedy Store in LA. He still runs a very successful comedy scene in Austin. So I just think yeah, we should dull it a bit down on the hate, and really, yeah, should look to appreciate it more. Second part of this podcast, I think, would also be cool to vlog and journal my kind of journey as an aspiring comedian. And I can give you insights to what it's like, just to do the most brutal open mics, to like, getting big shots at big gigs every now and then, touring, opening for big comedians, creating content like what I'm doing now. Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to journey. I don't think you really see much of an insight into people that are like starting out. Maybe some of like the guys on Kill Tony potentially, but you don't really see much of an insight. Usually comedians just tend to pop out of nowhere, right? Like Matt Rife, like even though he'd been doing comedy for like ages, he suddenly just had a few very, very viral TikToks, and then he's doing stadiums all of a sudden, and he gave the impression of coming out of nowhere. So I think it'd just be really good to like just vlog how I'm going. Maybe people are interested in what it's like to be an aspiring stand-up comedian. So I've been doing comedy for just under 2 years now. And I've had a pretty like things have gone well and things haven't. I've had a pretty like kind of a roller coaster experience. I've had some really, really good gigs. I've done a small set on TV, which is basically like, in Australia, we don't really have a big comedy industry. So we like doing a gig on TV. It's like we have this thing called Raw Comedy, which is like a national massive comedy competition, and like making it to like the final 10 in that competition. That's like the equivalent of probably what it was like to do like a late night 5-minute spot at like Letterman or like Jay Leno or whatever. Like that's what it. And I mean, even now in the US, like doing those 5-minute spots does not make your career, but like, yeah, I think it'd just be really interesting to provide some insight. So yeah, where am I in my career right now? So yeah, I've had some reasonable amount of success, but nothing too crazy. I'm like just on the edge of leaving the open mic scene, which is definitely everyone's first goal as a comedian, is to leave the open mic scene. And that's probably one of the hardest things to do, because like comedy is just this weird thing where it's like you can't really practice comedy without an audience. But the paradox is, why would anyone give you an audience if you're not good? So it means you have to get relegated to like doing these atrocious gigs in pubs where it's like 30 no-name open micers on the list, on the lineup, and then it's going to be like an audience of like a drunk 12 people that just don't really care, and then they're not going to give you proper responses. It's just this brutal environment. Like, it's like, imagine if you had to learn an instrument and like you were barely allowed to practice when you started out. Like, you had to prove that you were good at piano for people to let you play the piano. But then it's like, how would you get good if you couldn't practice that much in the first place? So it's just this like, and every comic says that starting out is absolutely the worst part about it. So I'm like just starting to edge out of the open mic scene. But to be clear, I still have to do open mics, but yeah, I'm desperate to leave because it is just the worst. Whereas like huge comedians like Dave Chappelle, right? He can drop in to the Comedy Store in LA. It's like 450 warm people who paid tickets to see comedy, and he can just do an hour of new material and he just uses that as his open mic. Like that is, absolute goals. I mean that's what you want. You want your piano to be in your room and you can just sit down and you just play for an hour, right? But you literally have to be the biggest comedian in the world to play like a good piano for an hour. Other than that, you just like have to make do with all these really crappy gigs for like 3 minutes. So this is why leaving the open mic scene, your number one goal if you're ever going to start out as a comedian. Really get people just think that like good comedians just come out of nowhere, but like it's so brutal that like most people can't make it past this stage. This stage it's infuriating, and then sometimes you see people that have barely started and then they rise out quickly, and then some people are given TV shows, and then someone you started out with is now opening for a comedy legend, and like you just can't take how unfair it is sometimes, and it is for sure unfair. But that's show business. It's an unfair world. So yeah, the whole point is just that's probably where I'm at right now in my comedy career. A bit about that later, but yeah, the whole point is just to vlog where I'm at, and to just give you some insights to what it's like to be an up and coming comedian, and maybe I'll be big one day, and then this will be a really interesting historic record, or maybe I won't. And I mean, no one's fucking watching this anyway, so who really cares? I'm also doing this just to get better at podcasting, making random content. So yeah, all right. What else am I going to talk about today? What will be the structure of this podcast? Let's do solo for now. Like, I might have some guests. It can be anything. Interviews, random segments. I do have some segment ideas, which we'll do a bit later. But yeah, I'll intersperse it with like a random like vlog clip. I'll change up ideas. I'll just see what works. Really, it doesn't matter. Like, no one's watching this anyway, so who cares? Yeah, and I think just to be very clear, I think especially for the stuff that's going to be out, very focused on trying to make this content positive, and like we just really want to build something for the community. I just don't think there's enough content out there right now that's promoting comedy and getting people inspired to try it. I don't think enough people realize like how great it is to do. I think there are too many people that do comedy that really shouldn't be, and then I think there's too many people that should be doing comedy that aren't. And so I really want to try and fix that by trying to just create a community of people that really love and love and celebrate comedy for what it is, like as a very, very pure and beautiful art form. Yeah, okay. What else am I going to talk about? All right, let's do the first segment of today. And that is a comedy special review. So I'll try and review a comedy special. And obviously I'll just be reviewing one that I like. But like, we'll review a comedy special every single show. And I'll just give you my thoughts. And you can also kind of just take this as a recommendation. So the special I'm reviewing today is Stuart Lee's live. Okay, it's called Basically. Let me just look. Yeah, it's called Basically Live at the Lowry. Again, do we really care what the name of the special is? I don't really think so. I think he released this maybe a month or so ago, pretty recently. So, what did I think of the special? Basically, his best work yet, for sure. Like, massive Stuart Lee fan. I think his style is very, very unique. And I think what makes it so unique is that it's it's so difficult to do. He does like a sort of meta comedy, right, where he gives running commentary on his own style. He has a lot of like self-referential sort of jokes that are like based off his fans, based off his career, and I think this recent special just really embodies all of that. You know, he has topical content which he pretends to resent. You know, he even pretends to kind of like resent parts of his act. You know, he berates the audience like usual. You know, he does all his classic, you know, all the classic things that he's known for, but like in this really well polished hour. You know, so I just think, yeah, absolutely incredible. Probably his best work yet. Should I do a star system? I'm really just making all this stuff up as I go. Yeah, I think we should do a star system. Yeah, I definitely think this is definitely a 5-star special. Am I just gonna throw out 5 stars? What does 5-star special even mean? You know, to be honest, like I don't even know what it means because like I've read like festival show reviews. You know, like the Melbourne Comedy Festival is really big in Australia. You know, I've read festival show reviews, Edinburgh show reviews, and like they use this star system, but like I don't really know what it means. And like, I mean, like a comedy critic, man, I don't even know what the point is. Point of a comedy critic is, but like they use this arbitrary system, so I guess I can use it as well. So yeah, I definitely think this is a 5-star special. It's like very, very like Stuart Lee, and he's definitely at his best. He's very, very sharp. He's crushing the whole time. I mean, that's a given. But yeah, a definite must watch. Maybe you might have to watch some of his earlier stuff first before you watch this, but I still think it's hard to know because it kind of felt like this special was made for a lot of his fans. So I don't know if I'm quite biased, you know, I'm biased towards getting a lot of the jokes. But yeah, definitely one of the best specials of the year for sure. I have no idea why he decided to release it on the Sky Network, like a right wing sort of platform. Like anyway, I watched it free on YouTube. Someone uploaded it. I guess Sky don't really care about IP law. But yeah, I don't know where you might have to go to the platform to watch it if it's still not on YouTube. But yeah, incredible special. Definitely will recommend. Yeah, I have no idea how to do that sort of comedy. And his career is definitely incredible. Something that I definitely would aspire to. Yeah, Stuart Lee, definitely one of my favorite comedians. Probably like, definitely in my top 20 for sure. Maybe top 10, but definitely top 20. Stuart Lee. I'll also be reviewing some of my favorite comedians, you know, intermittently. I'm just not going to make that video right now, but yeah, incredible special. All right, so next segment is the joke of the day. And the joke of the day, this segment is I guess I can just try and like explain to you like a joke that I'm like working on and trying to trying to get work. And it may be like in a couple of episodes later or the next episode I'll let you know how it went when I tested it, you know, whether it's in my act. Most of these are going to be bombs anyway. So but like it'd just be good for you to kind of see the process in which like an aspiring comic tries to come up with a bit. And I'll try and just talk you through the mindset of what it's like to create a joke. So the joke I want to kind of do a bit I'm working on right now is on table tennis. And that's obviously inspired from watching it in the Olympics. So I guess the idea I have with this bit is like, I think it's, there's a lot of like kind of absurd observations I have with table tennis. So for example, one idea I had is that it's like, it's the only Olympic sport which is also played in an office. You know what I mean? So that's like, to me, it's almost like a bit disrespectful in a sense that like people will just like play table tennis, like they'll just have a table in the kitchen or whatever, and people in suits or, formal attire will just, roll up their sleeves and just have a hit, and it's like no other sport really gets that sort of treatment. So I think there's a, like, yeah, I think there's something in that, yeah, the fact that it just gets like, it's kind of like imagine you were going for a run, like you invited someone out to a run, and then they like rocked up in like business casual, right? You just feel like, what? You're not respecting. What is this? And then the most they do is like roll up their sleeves, which is what people do once it gets serious in table tennis. They're like, oh, okay, just roll up my sleeves. It's getting serious now, Whereas like, like you see all these massive Olympic athletes in like China, like you can make a really good living as a ping pong player in China. So yeah, I just think gets a bit of disrespect indirectly, you know. Another idea I had about this is also that like everyone thinks that China invented table tennis only because they're so good at it. Maybe it's kind of similar in that like a lot of people think the US invented basketball as well, but actually both table tennis and basketball were invented by the same country. They were both invented by Great Britain, the British. They actually invented a lot of sports, even though they suck at most of them. So yeah, I think it's got to be something funny about like how people give China credit for inventing table tennis, but no one gives China credit for like inventing like gunpowder or the printing press or COVID. Oh yeah, that's a joke. So yeah, like I feel like there's just something there about how about just basically just have the absurdities around all these things with table tennis. And then I was thinking there could be some funny stuff about how like the process in which they came up with table tennis. You know what I mean? Like like how did the British, like assuming it was them that did invent it, like how did that idea even come up in the first place? You know what I mean? Like surely like tennis was invented first, obviously, but then was a bunch of people playing tennis, and then like one day it gets dark or something, and then they're just like let's continue this over dinner. Some like absurd idea like that. So yeah, that's kind of my ideas with table tennis. Would love to know what you think in the comments. No one's going to be commenting. That's all right. This is just more for educational purposes for me, really. Yeah. Okay. So, any other segment? No, I'll just stick with those two for now, and maybe we'll just keep adding. All right. So, I think the really interesting news I have, which is I am performing at the world famous Comics Lounge, Melbourne tonight. Yes, very exciting times. It's going to be my first time performing at the Comics Lounge, Melbourne. It's so basically Comics Lounge Melbourne is the biggest comedy club in Australia. Not that it says that much, but like big names like Louis C.K., Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, like pretty like anyone you can think of, like they've probably done the Comics Lounge. It's been around for like decades. Yeah, it's definitely been around for over like 15 years, but I don't know for sure. It's been around for a really long time. Um, it like it's one of the only comedy clubs in the country that just it consistently pulls like 300 people 5 nights a week, which, I think if you come from the US, those are rookie numbers, but in Australia, those are like S tier stats, you know. So yeah, one of the most, and maybe it's because of this reputation, there's a bit of a chicken and the egg sort of issue, but because it's such a reputable comedy club, yeah, basically, yeah, it just pulls this huge audience, and usually they're quite good, and a lot of like the biggest names in Australia, they come by and they gig there, and they, sometimes they test new, like the really big acts test new materials, and the new acts just like do their thing, So I'm performing on a Tuesday night, which is pretty normal. So the Tuesday night at the Comics Lounge, it used to be an open mic back when there was open mics just weren't even a thing. But like because of the reputation that this club eventually developed over time, people like 300 people is not a real open mic, like just like kind of like Kill Tony isn't a real open mic either. So people just didn't start treating it like an open mic, So I think to this day, it's still called the New Material Night. But yeah, most comedians, like unless you're just a huge name, most comedians don't go there to do new material, even on the New Material Night. I think it's an excuse to like charge a little bit. I think they charge a bit cheaper, obviously because it's a Tuesday night, but yeah, it has a reputation for like, I think people say Tuesday night's the best night because it's so cheap. There's this big lineup where you get lots of different acts. It's like this big showcase. Whereas I think the rest of the nights, they follow the more like American model of booking where it's just like people just doing 15-minute sets back to back to back. So yeah. Yeah, so basically, they put me on this Tuesday night. You do one of these. You do this set. I don't know how long. I assume it's gonna be like 5 to 7 minutes. They give you the set, and they're gonna watch the set, and basically, I'm gonna see whether I get passed. So I guess for those that don't know what being passed means, it basically just means that like when a club or when a producer or anyone like gives you a shot and then decides based on that one set you did whether you should do where you can do future sets. So back in the day, being passed at the Comedy Cellar in New York and being passed at the Comedy Store in LA, by Mitzi Shore, that's like a massive thing. And because especially when you're in like, the Comedy Store in LA used to be this enormous hub of like comedians where like there'd be TV producers, huge names would drop in. So like just kind of being in that area and hanging around, and like if you got a chance to just regularly go on stage, maybe hopefully a huge comedian or producer would see you, they would like you, and then they'd start giving you things like specials, TV shows. You could tour and open with them, so like, because comedy is very like business. It's very like network orientated, it's very important who in this industry, like people gigging with you, people vouching for you. That's why being around such iconic hubs like the Comedy Store in LA is so important, which is why, being passed. So there's all these famous stories about the late booker of the Comedy Store, Mitzi Shore, and, her giving people shots and then seeing, and then, deciding whether they get thumbs up or thumbs down, and like there's some really famous stories about how Jerry Seinfeld and Louis C.K. didn't get passed at the Comedy Store in LA. So Yeah, it's very interesting concept. And obviously you have that concept everywhere in comedy clubs. So, like for example, the Comedy Store in Sydney, they put me on like one of their Tuesday gigs, and then to like see whether how I do, and then like after that they'd message me, because uh, if depending on how it will go, they would message you about like whether they give you spots. So it's the exact same thing with the Comics Lounge. So yeah, am I nervous? Yeah, for sure. Definitely the biggest comedy club in Australia. And yeah, obviously, again, Australia doesn't have as big of a comedy industry as the US, and like you know, Melbourne's no LA, so it's not like there's just producers rolling in every night. Um, but it's still a big deal, and like television acts still do the Comics Lounge all the time, obviously. So like, it's still a really big deal, especially within the local comedy community, and also like just it's also just good to like it's also just good to do the club as like a almost like a scalp, and like even though it's kind of superficial, like you'll be just surprised that like saying that you've done the club and then posting about it like just earns you all that extra credibility in the comedy world, which just means that like over time, like even crappier rooms, which is like 99% of rooms, right? They'll book you because they're like, oh, well, he's a comics lounge act, or has he at least done it once? So, it's really good for that, all that sort of stuff as well. So, yeah. So basically, I'm gonna be preparing. I need to do that after I stop filming this, but like, I need to prepare a 7-minute set, and then I'll just build in. Obviously, I just cut a few jokes if it's 5. Obviously, it's just going to be all my classics. Yeah, I'm not risking. Yeah, it'd be stupid to do like a more newer sort of material. Like, you just want to do everything that works. You want to just blow the roof off of the venue so that the booker just like, you're undeniable, And sometimes there's luck, There's like and again, that's happened so many times. Like you just get the worst crowd, and then like, you know, really important people are watching, and everything just falls apart, and then you just miss out on a big opportunity. Like that happens all the time. So like as a comedian, you get pretty used to that sort of rejection. Um, but yeah, this is I think it's great. There's a big opportunity that like it's cool to share in this podcast, and I'll after filming this, I'll also I'll record a bit of like stuff when I'm there, so you can see what it's like, kind of like a vlog style, and then I'll film my reaction after and tell you how it went. Yeah, again, these sorts of small opportunities where like you just start getting booked at all these proper comedy clubs is is how you eventually just leave the open mic scene. And obviously, like, it's kind of like a vague definition what constitutes leaving the open mic scene. I would like to provide my own definition. I think you leave the open mic scene when you can go to an open mic without signing up, and you can just go on pretty much immediately. Like, I think when you can do almost any like non-proper paid gig, and you can just drop in whenever you want, that I think is a sign that you've left the open mic scene. Because yeah, I think what it means to be in the open mic scene is that like you just have to rely on those sorts of like sign up gigs to get stage time. And to be clear, there are lots of like intermediate gigs in between like a pure sign up open mic that anyone can do versus like headlining the Comics Lounge in Melbourne. Like there's all these like kind of crappy booked gigs which are like de facto open mics, but like you still have to like contact a booker and they still pre-organizes, like it's still, you just still get paid nothing. You can obviously still do whatever material you want because you're not getting paid anything. Um, but but yeah, like I think once you really start like not having to just constantly rely on open mics to just get stage time, I think that's when you're like, those are really good signs that you're starting to leave the open mic scene. So yeah, so you know what? I'm really bloody nervous for this set. I'm gonna start just preparing in my mind, thinking about what my set list can look like. Which basically, it's like basically I just have my jokes in like one word dot point form, and I like, I've delivered them hundreds of times, so like I know how I'm gonna say them and stuff, but like it's just good to have it in the order, just to know what you're gonna open with, what you're gonna do in the middle, what you're gonna close with, just to give yourself some certainty. Yeah, I'm gonna get there early, it's just good, polite, to hang out, just to get there on time. That's something that I just don't like. Comedians like get these incredible gigs and then they rock up late, and I just don't understand why. It's just part of like showing dedication, commitment. Like pretty ordinary things you'd expect at like a normal job, right? But most comedians aren't the type of people to have a normal job, which I think is a big benefit to people that have like a reasonable degree of conscientiousness. So yeah, anyway, I'm just gonna start preparing my set list, and I'll uh I'll tune in right after to see how I go. All right, bye. And we're back. So it is about 11:30 now at night now, and yeah, I just did my first set at the Comics Lounge. So how did it go? Uh, yeah, it went all right. Yeah, nothing like I didn't murder or crush, but it was a weird. It was a bit of a strange night, though. That's for sure. So I think the first thing that was a bit kind of like just not ordinary was that the fact that so usually the Tuesday nights at the Comics Lounge pack out like 400 people, and it's usually a very rowdy crowd because they're paying like discounted tickets, and this is something about like the new material night that really gets people like really excited, and so usually it's a lot of people's like favorite night. A lot of comedians usually say that the Wednesdays and Thursdays at the Comics Lounge can be a bit brutal, but yeah, Tuesdays and then obviously you got your Fridays and Saturdays is when people say it's good. But for tonight, for some reason, yeah, there was only 200 people, which obviously that's still plenty of people, especially by an open micer's standards. But yeah, a lot of other comedians on the lineup, they were saying how this is usually, this is not normal, and their energy was a bit weird. But look, in fairness, it's like cold in Melbourne right now. And the economy's not great, so I can kind of understand how like not people are really that keen on going out to see comedy. But still nonetheless, 200's still a great crowd. They do this thing where when they don't fully pack out, the Comics Lounge will they have these like raised seating towards the side, which like you can kind of see. I'll point it out in the video here. And what they'll do is when it's not full, they'll kind of cover it out, kind of to make the room a bit smaller, which I think is good, psychologically, just makes the room feel more compact. But then I guess the issue is that it makes the room slightly longer, which sometimes can be a bit of a weird vibe, but Yeah, no, I mean the crowd was still fine. They could still laugh. Obviously, 200 people is still quite a lot. But yeah, what else happened? I actually got given 10 minutes, which was generally quite surprising, especially, when a club is looking to see whether you get passed or not. Like, they'll usually give you just five because it kind of like contains the risk. Like if you're too bad, 5 minutes is not that long, but like 10 minutes of bombing can be a really long time. So I guess that's I didn't expect that. I kind of prepared seven, so I just added in a few more jokes. I probably ended up doing like 8.5 to 9, just to be on the safe side. Because it's weird. What they actually gave me was they gave me 7 to 10 minutes, um, which I don't know. Most comedians, when you usually book a comedian, you just tell them how much time they can do. Like, and usually 10 minutes is a really normal spot, so you get given 10 minutes. But then, sometimes there's some informal rules about like how long you can go over and under. So, for example, like most people don't complain if you go a little bit under because, it just makes the show more compact. Maybe other people can do a little bit more time. And usually the rule is you can go a bit over if you're absolutely murdering and, the audience just can't get enough of you. So, but, you can only really do like maybe 1 to 2 minutes over max, if that's the case. It really just depends on the show and it depends on the booker. Like, obviously, someone like Dave Chappelle, if he dropped in to the Comics Lounge, he could do like 40 minutes. And I've heard stories of him dropping into like a random gig in Australia and him just doing like 70 minutes and just like bumping the entire lineup, So, yeah, it kind of depends on a few factors, but like obviously as someone new, like I have to fully stick to my time. So yeah, I got given 7 to 10, and yeah, most comedians, since they're just so desperate for stage time, they will always do the upper limit of whatever. Like it's almost no point telling someone they can do 7 to 10 because they'll just most likely do 10. But yeah, that was a really nice, pleasant surprise. Maybe I could read it as a vote of confidence. But yeah, so I just did all my normal material. I went second last in the entire show, and it is a bit of a long show because there's 3 brackets. And a bracket is like they'll just have a group of comedians. Then you'll go on a quick 10-minute break, a group of comedians, and then a 10-minute break. So that's 3 brackets of comedians, and usually it's at the benefit of the bar or the club because it gives people more of an opportunity just to refill up on drinks. But I guess it's a bit of a strange vibe on a Tuesday night because yeah, I don't know whether people are just getting lit on a Tuesday, especially with that last break. So yeah, definitely the energy. I mean, and it's a long show, like it's a lot of people doing 10-minute to 15-minute sets. So like by the time I went on, there was definitely a bit of a dip in energy, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but yeah, you just have to work with the cards you're dealt with. And yeah, it still did fine. Like, I got like a mini applause break, and they laughed at most of my jokes. So yeah, yeah, and it was a great time meeting all the comics. Like, the best. So one of the most amazing things about doing the Comics Lounge is just being backstage because they have this beautiful wall of photos that they post up of all the big comics that have once performed at the lounge. And so like I just spent like at least half an hour just glued to that wall, and like every time I'd come back I'd just see a new comic and I'm like, oh my god. Like there were comics like obviously I saw Louis CK, Joe Rogan, Daniel Sloss, Tony Hinchcliffe, Carl Barron, Ronnie Cheng, you're my personal idol. Please let me open for you, Ronnie. Who else? Um, yeah, pretty much like anyone that's ever been like remotely big in Australia or in the world has like Chris Rock, um, Fluffy. Yeah, I mean the list goes on. Like every time I just looked at the this wall of photos, I just saw another amazing comic. So that was like a pretty surreal experience just to like know that you've been on the same stage as some of these comedic legends. And yeah, like people were super friendly. Like I gigged with my good mate Joe White. He helped vouch for me. He did great. Always just great to hang out with. Comics, especially like the great thing about like being at these clubs is that I guess you just get slightly less insecure comics because pretty much like you're at the top of the top club in the country. So like the people that are already there kind of like they're pretty self-assured, they know they can kill, they have like pretty established careers. And so like generally that makes people more supportive and like more friendly and more encouraging. They have less of a chip on their shoulder, whereas sometimes when you just like when you hang around too much of that open mic level, you just get a lot of talk of people like, oh dude, how is this Netflix comedian even funny? Like they're the most unfunniest comedians I've ever seen. Like you just get so much shit talk about like, oh, him and her getting this room, like that's so unfair. I'm so much better than them, So I guess it's just a little bit it's always just nicer to be around people that are like just a bit more encouraging and like yeah, because I think being in comedy does feel quite zero sum. Like it feel and it feels like that because there's like a finite amount of spots, or sometimes it can feel like there's a finite amount of gigs and spots, and so like if you're getting a spot, then it means um you've taken the spot of someone that could have been better than you. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of that mindset that goes on, especially when like yeah, up and comers get new rooms or like get booked on gigs they wouldn't otherwise have get gotten booked on usually, So anyway, so that was everyone was super friendly, the whole staff, the Comics Lounge staff, they're a great bunch of guys, super friendly. Dan, the book of the show, super, super friendly. Mate, which brings on to the question, did I get booked? Sorry, did I get passed? Um, yeah, I don't know, because you don't get a formal, like, you're in. You did it, mate. Like, sometimes it's just more like, sometimes you get like, yeah, we'll see how it goes. Not saying that that's what happened, but, I guess. And I'm in an interesting spot because I'm going to be coming back to the Comics Lounge in a few weeks to open for one of my really, really good friends and mentors, Neil Kahatkar. So, and I know that's not technically them booking me because he's doing a solo show at the comedy club and he picked me personally as an opener. But I guess it's just another, like I guess it's just another opportunity to impress. I mean, yeah, I think they seem pretty happy with it. So, yeah, like people were pretty supportive and pretty happy. Yeah, I did not bomb for sure, but like you hear stories where like because it's such a prestigious club, like sometimes like you just really have to murder to like kind of put your foot in the door to get like to really just make a name for yourself and to have people remember you and like and it sucks because as a comedian, like every single comedian will have that one gig where like just absolutely everything went right and like every second word that came out of their mouth like caused the entire like room to just like erupt. Um, and you get kind of this problem where you're always chasing the dragon because like no gig will ever be as good as that one, and you'll always like kind of just that will be your reference point to like what a good gig and what a crush feels like. So I mean, in that sense, yeah, I didn't do like absolutely incredible, but like it is about the long game, and it's about just consistently doing well, and and it just happens. The night is not amazing. This luck is so much of a factor. It's even if there's just 200 people, it's like it could be 200 like super progressive young crowd, or it could be like 200 of a very like wealthy like conservative older crowd, or it could be more like a diverse crowd. It could be you just really don't know what you can get, and 200 isn't even that big of a sample size. So like so much of it is luck in terms of like the crowd you get, like just the weather, how people are feeling, like the rest of the acts. Like there's so many things that factor into it. So it's always impossible to know like objectively how you would have gone if there was some sort of like AI crowd that you could just perfectly model of the audience, and just simulate constantly. Which I think I would love. I would love for something like that to exist, but it's like literally impossible. Because you have to incorporate people's like cultural understandings and sense of humor. But yeah, what else about the lounge? I mean, I've hung out at the Comics Lounge. They have this great policy where they let basically, without any questions asked, assuming that there's space, all comedians can just hang out at the back. And it's a very old school sort of rule, but like, there's something really cool about like running things old school. Like if I ran a comedy club, I would let all comics like come in for free as well, provided that there's space. Yeah, there's some other clubs that I won't name that are a little bit yeah, they're a little bit rude about that. But yeah, that's just how it works. So yeah, that's the great thing. So, even when I just started, people were just saying, just go to the Comics Lounge and you get to see what like the top of the top in Australia are doing, and that can be your standard. So, I've been going there for a while. It's a great iconic established venue, like just in terms of like how long it's been around, and like the bar and the acts that go on. So yeah, like did it feel that much of a difference being a act? No, not really. I guess. I guess just as a comedian, you just get used to things so quickly. Like I just remember like I was like it used to be like my dream to go on, and then now you go on, like it's still an incredible experience, and like a huge honor. But like I don't know, you just be like, all right, well, it was just another gig, right? It was just 200 people at like a good comedy club. So just move on to the next one. So yeah, it's hard to kind of like balance those two sorts of concepts, but yeah, otherwise it went pretty well. Oh, another really great thing that they do is they give you really high quality footage of your performance with the mic, with the live with the microphone audio feed, pretty much the day of, which I think, yeah, is an absolutely underrated and also just like amazing service for comics. Because what that means is that, like, yeah, if you had a great crowd work moment, or if you just have a really good clip, and usually, it's such an amazing crowd that, like, it's the best version of your joke. You're probably doing that at that club. So, like, it's a great opportunity to like upload it onto social media. And then you could, and the Comics Lounge is clearly their logos in the background, so like you can like it's you get the benefits of like cross promoting both. So I think like comedy rooms where like they just record everyone's set with high quality, good audio, and then they just give it to the comedians for like free use. It's just like it's the most amazing thing. So I think that's one thing that they do super super well, and like such a quick turnaround. So it's just yeah, I think it's an incredible service, and it's still something that like not a lot of yeah, surprisingly just not all comedy clubs do this. So like then what that means is you have to set up your like crappy little tripod, and then you have to do your like either your budget camera or just your like smartphone, and then like you get that like crappy audio like you get firstly like since at the back you just get all this like reverb, and then you get this like you're just getting the sound from the speakers, which is really echoey, and then the crowd laughing is a bit echoey as well. And so you just don't get as high as a quality sort of footage. So yeah, that's something also amazing that they do, which, yeah, more comedy clubs should definitely do that. So like Newcastle Comedy Club and, ID Comedy Club in New South Wales, they're like super good at doing that as well. Comedy Republic do that as well, but you do have to pay. But they do two angles, and it looks really good as well. So, I mean, I guess if they're spending the time to like edit it, like I think it can be worth it, especially if you are professional, and like getting that high quality clip can just be so valuable, so yeah. Yeah, I can show you some of that footage now actually. Um Maybe I'll just be playing it in the background, who knows. Um but yeah, I think that wraps up the show. First episode. Um yeah, if you think it was worth listening to, please like and subscribe, or I don't know what platform this is going to go on, but like the podcast market, I'm just trying to edge my way into that market space of media which people consume whilst they're taking a dump or on their commute or working or something. I know it's really, really popular. I think I can find a market of people that'll be interested, but yeah, it's not going to happen now. It will happen over time. But yeah, that was the first episode. I don't know if there's a commenting function wherever I'm going to post this. Leave a comment of your thoughts and everything. And yeah, catch you next time. Bye.